Well, folks, I am really happy once again to welcome back Nick Aldis, who is the NWA Worlds Heavyweight Champion, as he joins us once again. And Nick, a lot going on with you right now, and I want to thank you for taking time out to talk with us and all the excitement that's going on with this new movement that's just kind of sweeping the nation and the world right now with NWA. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. As you can probably hear, my son is decided to decided to do a run in like he often does when I do these podcasts. But no, I gotta say he was with me yesterday at the big event too, because Mickie had a concert up in Niagara Falls, and we had been in the UK and we'd been in England visiting family, and Mickie had been there for a WWE live event. So we had been over there together, and then she'd gone back to go do that and then go do a concert. So he'd come with me. Yeah. And it just, that's the way it worked out. He had to come with me to the big event. And the promoters were very accommodating. They were really cool. And they were, but I could tell that they were a bit nervous, like, is he going to be okay?
What's he going to get into?
Yeah, but they didn't realize that he's done this before. So he just chilled out. He was chilling out with Arthur and Sika, the Wild Samoans, actually. So it's funny. He was just sitting there like playing with his trains and playing with his tablet, just like saying hi to fans and stuff. So yeah, no, it's the one thing about him is that if he ever decides he wants to get into the business, he's very well exposed to it. I don't think he's going to have any issues with with being enamored by it. He's gonna have a very good handle on it by the time he gets there, if he ever wants to.
Yeah, and what's really funny about that is you talk to like members of the Hart family, and they talk about how the mansion up there was just chaos every day. It was a circus. They had people rolling in and animals down in the basement, and all these legends coming by. And to them, that was normal life. But can you imagine, you're in school and you're telling people what was going on, and we had midgets over last night, and a bear was down in the basement. But this with kids of wrestlers, it's just normal life for them.
Yeah, and it's funny because I did not grow up, in anything closely resembling that. So it's interesting now that I've met and worked with a number of guys who are second generation or third generation or whatever, and and I'm always very interested to hear about that. And now Donovan will be one of those guys if he ever decides to get into it, which of course we're not. Way too far off for us to even be considering at this point. He's a 5-year-old. So it's like, but yeah, no, he's been around enough, and he was with us in Atlanta, and Dave and Billy were great. They had the facilities there are so great. I know that. I know it's a studio, so it's kind of, so some people might look at it as sort of, it's pokey, but man, I've never, working for Impact at Universal, and I've never we never worked somewhere for a television thing where the facilities were that great. Like we had the whole floor of that place, and loads of rooms, tons of facilities. In fact, they're really, really state of the art. And so we he had a room set up where he could chill and have his toys and play and everything. He had a blast. He was jumping all over the ring. We've got a load of footage of it where he's terrorizing a bunch of the guys in the ring and stuff like that. So yeah, very cool.
And I was going to get into this a little later in the conversation, but since we were talking about it, how do you balance it all? I mean, you got Mickie, who's also a part of this business, and you as well, and then you have a child, and you guys, your schedules must be just crazy. So how do you guys balance it all?
We just, we make it work. I mean, it's just, it isn't easy. But, the way I always equate it is like, until once he's he did pre-K last year, and he's doing he's like a September birthday. So he's one of those kids who falls into that bracket where he can go, he could either be the oldest in his class or the youngest. Right. So we opted we'd rather him be the oldest in his class and start kindergarten next year. So this year he's almost kind of having like a gap year, but obviously he's still, we're essentially kind of homeschooling him, in this year before he goes to kindergarten fully and go, and then he's in education, right? Like, so, we're sort of taking this year to sort of enrich him with his life as far as like traveling with us stuff. So we're almost deliberately trying to have him be with us for as much of this stuff as possible, so that he can take it in, you know, and get that experience from it. And like traveling and just meeting different people, we've just seen such a positive development in him as far as how he reacts to things and how he's matured and stuff. So, and I think of that as quite valuable, really, as, you know, compared to, you know, he's going to go to school and he's going to be in school for years, you know, but the idea of being able now to be going to all these different environments and meeting all these different people and seeing these processes, it will, you know, to me, like when I first wanted to get into entertainment, and I'm sure Mickie would say the same, you know, sometimes it seemed like such a far away thing. You know, it seemed like such a far off idea, but, you know, he will be blessed where to him, he won't ever feel that way.
Right.
So, you know, and so I think for us, like that's a valuable sort of part of his life that we've been able to enrich with this year, where he's kind of with one of us at most of the time, you know, either, I mean, accompanying us or just sort of being around that world.
Yeah, and boy, don't even get me started on how education works today. But what's awesome about it is that right now, you know, the world's his classroom. I mean, that you're able to take him to these places.
Yeah.
Not only just being with you guys, but the fact that you know, he's going to be a kid that goes into first grade or wherever, who's probably seen a lifetime of of experiences that kids won't ever even get the chance to experience. And I think that should be a part of a kid's life if you can do it. I know things will change once he gets into regular school, and you guys will have to balance it then. But are you going to be, I don't even know if you could do it, but you'll see like actors will, you know, they have this event going on, and so that person will stay home during that time. I know that Edge does this, you know, in his life. But is that, you guys going to try and plan it that way, or are you just going to always have somebody there that, how are you going to?
That's pretty much how we do it. We sit down and we get our schedules and we kind of look ahead over the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks, or maybe the next 2 or 3 months, and then sort of go, okay, so I'm here and you're there, and then we'll be here and then we'll be here together. And then, you know, and like, so maybe he can come with me to this and he can go with you to that. And then here he can be at home, or he can be there and someone can be with him, you know, like, yeah, pretty much how you know, and then we also have, you know, the support system of Mickey's family, or, you know, and then a few people, you know, around that we trust. And yeah, and we've always been able to make it work that way. So it's, you know, he spends, fortunately, I mean, Mickey's been injured, you know, and so she's been fortunately in or at least the one positive from that is that she's been home more. And my schedule with the NWA, you know, despite being the traveling world champion and obviously with the stuff, but since we've had the show Powerrr, I kind of came off the road quite a lot while we were in preparation for that, because I was so heavily involved in the planning of that as well. So, like I said, you know, I'm at a place in Nashville right now, and, you know, we had that place so that, you know, Dave and I could be around, you know, on a sort of fairly regular basis. And so he's not deprived, you know, he gets to be with his parents a lot more than kids whose parents work regular jobs, you know, because those parents, you know, they stick them in daycare, they go to work, and then, you know, they finish work at 5 o'clock and pick them up and bring them home, and they see him for a few hours a day, really. But like with me, like if he's not with us, he's not with us, but when he's with us all day. So
yeah, oh, that's awesome. Really. And with that, and folks, you've had an incredible ride just so far, and you've worked for a number of organizations, from Pro Wrestling Noah to Global Force Wrestling, TNA, of course. But it's the NWA really that your loyalty lies and has. And folks, if you want to hear the whole story, which is a tremendous story of Nick, tune into that first episode of Prime Time with Sean Mooney. It's really a lot of fun and a great episode if you want to learn about the real path that he took early on. But I want to get right into it with NWA, and we've had a conversation before about how much we love kind of the old school and the you know, the classic wrestling and the golden age and the throwback to old school. And your handprints are all over what they're doing now. And tell me, first of all, why the loyalty to NWA, and then how that relationship really started and then flourished.
Well, I know you've had experience in the entertainment world outside of wrestling, and one of the things you hear a lot in Hollywood or in New York or places like that is a vehicle. You need a vehicle. Yeah. And right. I think the same is true in wrestling, especially now with the sort of varying promotions you have and the sort of different styles and the multitude of talents that are out there. Is something I had never really thought about before, because my goal was just get a big contract or go to WWE, get on TV, but yeah. as you develop who you are as a performer, you start to realize like you need the right vehicle. We see it more and more with talents who seemingly have what they wanted all along, which was a WWE contract, and then they ask to leave. And it's not a knock on WWE. It's just it's not the right vehicle for them. I looked at the landscape, the way wrestling was going, noticed that there was a certain trend that was quite prevalent in most of the industry, as far as most of the industry was doubling down on the high impact, high velocity, highly athletic style that perhaps was less geared towards storytelling and emotional investment, and more towards spectacle and sort of ultra athleticism, stunt kind of stuff. Right. And again, not a knock. Right. To me, that's a portion of the industry, and it's not a portion that is my forte. And when I saw how most of the industry was sort of heading that way, I started to feel a bit disenchanted. And then when Billy and Dave contacted me a couple of years ago about the NWA, they described to me what they had in mind, and it just, our goals and our cultures and our philosophies aligned. And then I've just been, we've had a very balanced relationship, in the sense that I like Cornette once said this on one of my big matches. I forget which one it was, but he sort of said, the NWA has made Aldis and Aldis has made the NWA. Mm-hmm. And I understand that, and we all understand that, like, there's never been any kind of, there's never been any dispute over sort of who did what for who here, right? Like sometimes it can be sometimes in wrestling it could, promoters can be a little short-sighted, and suddenly when it suits them, they're like, I did all this for you, I put you on our show, and I gave you this opportunity, I gave you this platform, I gave you this, I gave you that, and not sort of not remembering that, yes, I gave you my body, and I gave you my work and my intellectual property and my talent, and so it's like, this is the first time I've ever had that sort of very symbiotic sort of existence where we're a team, man. Like, we are just like, we really feel like we're all doing this together. I feel like this is my company. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Billy. But I'm part of it. Like this, it's certainly my body of work as far as I'm concerned. This is absolutely, up to this point, is the defining period of my career.
Yeah. And when you guys started putting this machine together, what was those first discussions like, saying this is what we want it to look like, this is what the element we want to bring in? When ultimately, I don't know if they initially came in and, hey, let's bring back studio wrestling, or did it start a different way? Like I said, you said, okay, this is what we want it to look like, and then, hey, why don't we do it like this?
So I'll answer that in two different ways. So the studio part was I know that was something that Billy and Dave had wanted for a long time. Like they had, Billy had, you know, grown up watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, and he and Dave both had wanted very early on, you know, they had always talked about wanting to do that. It wasn't something that I had, you know, thought about. But I always enjoyed, you know, I love the, you know, you know this from our conversation before, but I love stickman interviews, you know, so obviously like the Crockett era and NWA, Mid-Atlantic, you know, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then the late 80s, early 90s WWF were sort of is still my favorite stuff to watch as far as the actual TVs, because I love stickman interviews. To me, I think that's really the essence of a wrestling interview, rather than a guy walking down a ramp into a ring in front of a load of people and speaking into a microphone. You know, like that's a speech, like that's addressing people, but interviews is different. Like they're two different things, you know, real promos, real interviews. And to me, I've always done better with a person to bounce off, with a stickman, you know. When I was in TNA, I would often ask, hey, can I do this with JB? Can I get, you know, Jeremy Borash? Like, can I do my promo with JB instead of just doing it for no reason? Especially if it wasn't in the ring, you know, if it was backstage. I was like, why am I standing here talking to a camera? Like, who organized this? Like, how was I able to organize this myself? You know, like, this doesn't make any sense, you know? And, you know, I know that there's this culture that exists now where when you ask those questions based on logic and common sense, that suddenly it's like, okay, boomer, or, you know, there's this kind of culture now to sort of shoot down that mentality like it's not necessary. But I believe it's absolutely necessary, because it's all those little elements that add up to the overall feeling and experience that a viewer gets when they watch pro wrestling. And if you take those elements away, you know, then they're only getting certain ingredients. You know, it's like giving them a steak without seasoning or a side, or, you know, it's just kind of like, okay, here's the meat, that's what you came for, right? You're just like, no, I came for the whole thing, you know. I like watching professionals do what they do best. And, you know, to me, yourself, Mean Gene, you know, Tony Schiavone back in the day, and, you know, even David Crockett and stuff, it was like, I love that element of it, because you see the contrast of a good stickman. And we're blessed now that we've got like Dave Marquez and Joe Galley, and obviously Corny when he's not commentating. Sometimes he's at the booth. We sort of rotate the guys, but Marquez has sort of taken that role for us mostly. And it's just like the response from people is fantastic. You know, but to answer your question, the other part of it was, I think we talked about this before, but I wanted to create a sort of prize fight atmosphere and feel to my matches. I wanted the NWA Worlds title, you know, when it was featured, to feel like a big deal, to feel like the biggest deal. And, you know, you were all in, and we got to do that interview. And that was a huge, huge thrill for me. Like it was such a bonus kind of career highlight for me to get to do that. And like, my only regret is I wish that we'd have been able to do it live, you know, backstage at the arena, you know, because it would have been 10 times better, because I would have just been, you know, we both would have been jacked up on that adrenaline, you know. But like,
well, also a lot of people don't remember, they don't know that how we did that. I knew we were supposed to do something. You knew we were supposed to do something, and we're in the green room with everybody. I mean, like legends of and then Dave's like, okay, you guys, let's do this. And you and I are like, okay. So we both want to get it right. You know, not just because we want to be to be a good promo, but at the same time, we're in front of all these people, and suddenly you just have to block this out.
Yeah, I think I know that Lagana talked to you about this when he did your show, because I listened to it. But yeah, just to recap for people, just to set the scene. We were at Starcast because we had just done the weigh-ins and all of that stuff, which was great. And I'm glad that we had done that first, because then I had a little bit of that adrenaline going from being in front of the audience and stuff. Because I need an audience for promos, really. Like, you know, I can cut a decent promo in a quiet room, but for me, like, my best stuff comes when there's an audience there. It's the weird thing. It's like a pressure. for
Right.
some reason
No,
it kind
no,
of,
exactly what you're talking about. You got to nail
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, it sort of eliminates to me the idea that I can, and once it's eliminated mentally, it just doesn't happen. And yeah, so we're in this green room, and so all the main players for All In, so Cody, the Bucks, Kenny Omega, for some reason, all the Impact Wrestling sort of top brass were back there for some reason. Yep. So like there's D'Amore and Don Callis and Ed Nordholm and stuff. So it was already kind of weird because there's like some dicey kind of tension there between them and Billy and stuff anyway. And there's me and Logano, Jeff Jarrett and Karen Jarrett are there.
I think Arn Anderson was in there, and I
maybe
think the Steiners. I mean,
New
it was
Japan, Okada, and like his sort of New Japan, like so the New Japan, some of the New Japan brass were back there and stuff, and like suddenly Dave's like, "Hey, we need to shoot that thing. Can we, you want to shoot it right now? Okay, everyone, quiet down." Like, I just went, like, shit.
Oh boy.
So then, yeah, like, but fortunately, we got it in one take, and I remember because I remember thinking to myself, "You will not flood this interview in front of, especially not in front of the Impact brass, like, given everything that's happened there." So I remember just like walking off and just thinking like, all right, follow that. But yeah, no,
I remember I was like, I just got to remember one thing: is it's NWA Worlds Heavyweight Champion, and like, don't screw that up, Mooney. And it was, yeah, and that's like it took me back decades, because I remember it was the same kind of thing when we do those interviews for Saturday Night's Main Event, and Dick Ebersol would be sitting there with his arms folded, and Vince is in there, and you talk about pressure. I mean, this is for network television, and then you've got like 4 superstars, and you're the guy holding the microphone. You cannot screw this up, and you had to. I mean, it's I don't even know if half the time I listened to what they said. I just made sure I hit my mark, didn't hit the furniture, didn't bump into the furniture. But it did. It took me back, and I just remember thinking, they're not here. Just do this with Nick. Nick's with you, and we did. We pulled it off. But it was fun.
That's the interesting thing about and obviously time is the best teacher of anything. But what I didn't know in my 20s, and what I sort of came to realize from moments like that, was that like it's just experience. It's just time. Like once you like. Just remember, it's not, you don't even have to think about it. It's not remember your training. It's like, no, it's there now. So it's, so it's, even though you might, because I've had people often, even young wrestlers or sort of people who are on the fringe of the business, or just friends of mine who enjoy the business. Even going back to my days with Gladiators and stuff, some of the guys would say to me, "How do you do that? Like, God, I'm so jealous. Like, how are you able to just reel off like something like that down the camera in one take and just walk away?" Like and it's like, it's practice, it's a fine line between a clarity of thought and allowing your instincts to take over, right? It's having that sort of balance of both. It's sort of, you have this, in my mind anyway, it's like you have this sort of mental bank of words and phrases and delivery, and then the rest of it is, okay, take what's happening in the moment and let that combine with what you've got here in the mental bank, and it all comes out, and then boom.
But getting back to what we were talking about before, when you mentioned about how those interviews, those stick mic interviews, had such an impact, because it's all about telling stories to me, and that person on the microphone helps you do that. And whether it's a reaction, because you get a reaction right away, they don't even have to say anything, but you need someone who's kind of mirroring what people at home might be thinking. I always keep that in my mind.
Yes.
But and today, though, like you said, we see these high spots. That's what everything is about, it seems. And they've moved away from that telling the stories, and it's great to a point. But then you're okay. What's next? How much higher a ladder can you fall off of? How many times can you flip off that top turnbuckle, that ring post?
To me, it's kind of it's first of all, it's diminishing returns, to your point, because if the fundamental factor of what you're giving people is oh my God, then the next time it's going to be a little less, and
right.
So
it just keeps every time, and the thing that's also frightens me is that it's what is the extent of this? What has to happen before they say, we can't keep doing this? Somebody has to die in the ring. I don't know, but You see some of these
Yeah.
spots today, and it's like, my God, I cringe.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you're from an era where, unfortunately, a lot of the guys were experiencing significant money and fame for the first time, and you know, the 80s, and yeah, there's, you know, led to a lot of vices, and so, you know, there were quite a lot of casualties 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, and it's like, and we've all looked back at that and sort of learned from that and been like, okay, you know, we've got to be a little more careful. You know, guys, you know, the business in general has sort of acknowledged, like, okay, guys are a bit careless with the steroids, a bit careless with the pills, a bit careless with, you know, the lifestyle, right, and the, you know, and everything. But it's like, that's almost been replaced now by guys are just dumping each other on their heads, you know, like over and over again, and just
this whole thing about flipping out of the ring onto the floor, where you got to depend on 3 or 4 guys to catch you and catch you right. It just it's scary, and I don't know where the extent of it. And like you said, it's not a blow to them. We're like saying it's not a knock, because that's, you know, there are people in there and the people enjoy that, but I fear for their health. I mean, I just think of, and you have to keep going out there and topping it, because like you said, it's diminishing return. If you would have seen, you know, I remember somebody coming off the you know, the top of the ring post. That was a high spot back in the WWF, and you know what Randy did, coming off with the elbow, that or Snuka, you know, that was. And you could, and, you know, the matches were slower paced, and
and the funny thing about that is that you can still, you know, people talk about that, and then the sort of response to it is always like, well, we can't go back, but you kind of can, because I've done it. You know, I'm sort of
absolutely.
Like,
but people and people are enjoying. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You guys wouldn't be having this response you're getting.
Yeah, like I can't say this any more unequivocally than this, but like, nothing that we do is done with a combative mentality toward any other type of wrestling, right? Like if you want to be a fan of the NWA, we do not require you to hate any other type of wrestling. You know, like we do not require you to think that multiple dives out of the ring are stupid, or this or that, or doing moves on the floor every match, or, you know, we don't need you to think any of those things. If you do, that's fine. Just, you know, everyone's allowed their opinion, but
they're not taking shots at these other organizations either during the broadcast at all.
No, we want to speak to an audience that believes in sort of fundamental common sense storytelling, in the sense of like, you know, and again, you know, in Hollywood, there's really only, what do they say? There's really only like 5 different types of story, you know, or something. It's like, there's, you know, whatever it is, like there's, you know, if you can pretty much take every successful movie, and, you know, and it's one of 5 different sort of stories told in a different way, with different themes and settings, right? And, you know, I remember, like, I've spent a lot of time under the learning tree of Scott Hall as one guy I can think of, and, you know, he told me once, you know, that like that he had learned from someone that, you know, the basic emotions that a babyface takes an audience through are sort of fear and greed. You know, where it's like, when the babyface is selling, they're fearful, like, oh no, I don't want my favorite guy to get beat up. But then when the babyface is coming back, now they're greedy, like, yeah, keep going, give it to him. You know, and it's like, when you think of it in that respect, it really is, you know, ultimately, your job is to engineer a situation to where the audience is paying to see an outcome that satisfies them, you know, and that can be done in a infinite number of ways. But as long as you keep that in mind, you know, half this stuff writes itself. You know, and the over engineering of not only matches, but also of creative, you know, booking. It's like, we just kind of looked at all of it and went, the stuff that I remember, the stuff that strikes a chord with me as an audience member, was very rarely about, oh yeah, do you remember this one storyline? God, it was so intricate. You know? Think of it like that. You think like, God, remember when
murder mystery or something?
Remember when like, remember this, remember that cream of the crop promo that Savage cut, or remember when, like, you know, like the Rock and Hogan, remember Rock and Steve Austin, or, you know, whatever, remember when so-and-so turned heel? Like, they're just this sort of, you know, the business is built around moments. That's always what I talk about when I'm having my input, you know, as far as sort of ideas and stuff. Remember, the business is built around moments, not matches.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And that's true. I mean, and you're seeing it. And I mean, and talking about the line that you're on now, which I find really interesting to watch, because you're walking kind of a fine line with who you are as a champion, and then you've got Camille involved in this, and you're still, you know, you're a baby face to an extent here, but at the same time, you're walking this line with Camille, which kind of remind me of Randy Savage with Elizabeth. And I don't know if that was kind of along your way of thinking, but is it more difficult today because of our culture, you know, the Me Too kind of movement, that you've got to be careful of what you do? Or is it because that, are we more accepting that women in the ring now are just as damn tough as the men in many cases?
I hadn't really thought of the Me Too
That's heavy,
thing.
huh? That's pretty deep,
Yeah,
Mooney.
no,
Jeez.
I mean, well, because there's, you know, the thing that's funny is that with the whole Camille thing is that the origin of that character, you know, and the origin of her, you know, is legitimate, in the sense that when we, after All In, when we were thinking about what's the hook, or, you know, what's the rematch, you know,
Yeah.
what's the next logical steps for the rematch. So because we had elements in the All In match where, like, for example, when we had the stuff outside where Cody did the dive, I caught him with the elbow, so then he's
Right.
down, and should have been a count out, right? But
Right.
Earl's checking on him, so Earl doesn't count him out. So we planted that seed deliberately. We had that in our mind because, you know, the next match, the sequel, would be 2 out of 3 falls. So
Right.
it's like, no excuses this time. You know, like, you're not gonna, right? It's, someone's got to, you know, one man has to beat the other twice. You know,
Right.
so that was kind of the next logical progression. Plus it spoke to our tradition in the NWA. You know, back in the day, traditionally the NWA championship was always defended 2 out of 3 falls. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the first part, and then the second part, you know, the major sort of part of the Cody match, All In, besides the finish, obviously, was Brandy's involvement. And so, you know, again, in thinking about it, leading up to NWA 70 and the rematch, it was, you know, we just, to me, good creative is easy. You just ask questions, you know, and the
Mm-hmm.
question was, okay, what would I do about Brandy, right? Would I request that she be barred from ringside? Yes, I could do that, but she's part of Cody's act, you know. So the alternative to that is, what if I had, and I just said this out loud to Dave, I said, what if I had someone to neutralize her? Oh, I said, it needs to be a woman though, you know. And I said, and obviously can't be my wife because she's unavailable.
Yeah.
and I said, and it can't be a valet as such, because I didn't want there to be any implication of a sort of romantic involvement, because it wouldn't have
Right.
been authentic. Again, because most people know that I'm married to Mickie. So it was like,
Right.
I said, what if I had a female bodyguard? You know, like, I always thought that, you know, Triple H and China dynamic was great, you know, in the early days, and that, you know, and that was such a unique character because it was, like you said, it kind of spoke to a lot of those different levels.
Yeah.
Like, well, is the guys, you know, she's going to mix it up with the guys, but are the guys allowed to hit her too? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. No,
and
Sherry, Sensational Sherry, you
yeah,
know,
man,
she
I
was the
love
first kind of
Sherry.
pioneer
Sherry
with that. Yeah.
favorites,
Yeah.
and I was just sort of describing this to Dave, and I said, the only thing is I don't know who's out there, and he was the one who said, I know just the person, like.
Yeah. Right.
And he had seen her. He'd been scouting different, you know, for different talent for us, and he said, "I know just the right person." And
Mm.
man, she's been magic, and she has learned so quickly, like, her, you know, on the job training, and man, she's got great instincts. Obviously, she's a great legit athlete, so that
Yeah.
helps. You know, she just fully committed to the role from day one. And you know, she obviously has, you know, she obviously has great physical attributes. You know, her size is awesome. Obviously, she's a beautiful woman, and But what's really interesting is her instinct, you know, and her charisma, and you know, she's the storyline, the whole sort of is really has been born out of people being genuinely intrigued with who is she, where did she come from, you know, what's the deal? Because again, because you know, we take what's real. I think we talked about this on the last time I was on the show, but you know, we it's easier to take what's real and play off that than it is to just say, hey, this person came from another planet, you know, and there's this and that. Like, no, and if we don't, and look at the, you know, look at the simplicity of what's really getting her over is that she's not speaking, and people are just asking because it's why, you know, and there's an anticipation for what's next, and it stands out because our show is built around talkers, real interviews, you know, between myself, Eli Drake, James Storm, you know, Ricky Starks killed it on his first promo. Yeah. Josephus, I mean, even Trevor Murdoch. Like, if you can't talk, you're going to have a real hard time working for the NWA. Yeah. And in a sea of seasoned talkers, you know, you've got this mysterious woman who's choosing not to speak, but we know she can, but she's choosing not to, and that's the question. You know, it's one of those. You have to be careful with, you know, my opinion. You have to be careful with mystery, because mystery can very quickly become confusion. But I think we've walked that line very well with her, in the sense that nobody really knows why, and that because there is nothing out there to indicate what it is, you know, and we're all going to find out how that pans out at the same time.
Yeah. No, but she's you guys have played it really well, and you know, even the points where they come in and they got the camera really up close, and she kind of does that, well, and then doesn't say anything, and you're kind of like, oh man, she's going to, but I mean, I really enjoyed watching that whole thing unfold, and I want to get into more of the talent, but just to follow up with that, because we're talking about women and this kind of intergender that we're. You know, we see a lot of these matches now with women. They're not just at ringside accidentally getting involved anymore. And it's just it's interesting to me to see it happen because of what, like I mentioned, what way our culture has been now, where they kind of want it both ways. And it's I think, you know, and I think in a lot of ways professional wrestling is helping to move that along. I mean, we just saw a match in Saudi Arabia, the first time ever they had a female match there.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and how it's
wouldn't be the first time that pro wrestling sets the tone for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's sports and entertainment. It's like, but many folks like to sort of still, even today, like to sort of look down their nose at wrestling as this sort of, you know, bastard child of entertainment or whatever. And but yeah, I mean, I think that The Rock has proven, you know, that there's the stereotypes were wrong. And when you look at all the sports that have borrowed from our business, like UFC or boxing, or even you know, you know, I mean, who'd have ever thought that you'd see pyro at a tennis match, you know? But it's there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like, you know, you're telling me that they didn't see pyro first on pro wrestling, because I guarantee you they did. Yeah. You know, and it's just and so we have set the tone in a lot of things culturally, but you know, just I can only speak for the NWA and for myself, but we one of the things that we've been very clear internally about from the beginning is kind of like how I don't see, like, I see all this, you know, women's empowerment stuff in wrestling, and people like to talk about, like, you know, I know that WWE obviously branded their women's evolution and stuff, but you know, I have a sort of slightly different perspective on it, because you know, my wife came from an era where that wasn't happening. You know, but she was still a featured talent, and she was still doing great. And you know, I don't think Sable was having any issues with women's, you know, with you know, like with her pay. You know, back in the day, like she was one of the highest paid talent. You know, so when it comes to us and our stuff, like we don't have. There's no exact science for any of it. Like we're not we're not going out there going, okay, we really need to make sure we focus on more women or more minorities or this or that, like, because once you start playing that game, you just kind of become almost become a slave to the sort of gotcha culture, right?
Yeah.
Like you suddenly become like a puppet of it. If you're good, we'll use you.
Yeah, that's simple as that. It's about entertainment.
Yeah,
That's what it's all about.
Right. And if you sell tickets, you sell merchandise, if you make us money, you will earn money, right?
Yeah.
Like if the next time we go to Atlanta, it's plainly obvious from everybody there that Thunder Rosa is the biggest star we've got, then she'll be featured as such.
Right.
And that could happen. But but we're not, we don't have any sort of predefined boxes that we want to try and tick or anything like that. We do the best with what we have available to us, and then we go with what's working with our audience. Like we're like I kind of get tired of diversity for diversity's sake. Like I don't think that wrestling's ever had an issue with it, right? No. Like I've seen some of this race stuff, and I'm not obviously going to sort of comment on that. Not really my place to, but I don't remember ever as a fan thinking, well, I don't like this guy because he's because he's not white. Like if I like the guy, I like the guy, right? Like
like kids, like that's what kids do. I mean, you should never lose that,
Right. And
but you mentioned this.
Our business is one of the best for being
equality or being
right
diverse without even setting out to be that way.
Because of the way that our model is set up, is it's like you get paid off the house. If you make us money, you earn money.
Yeah. Well, and also I'm sure you felt this along the way. I know when I was there that I felt that the wrestling business was one of the most tolerant businesses in the world.
Absolutely.
It's exactly what it came down to. It didn't matter if you were a small person being politically correct, as they call them midgets then, or whatever you were, whatever walk of life if you sold tickets, you were in that ring for a promoter.
Absolutely.
Didn't matter. Had no idea what. Yeah. And I always felt that. And I've told people that.
Yeah, I see Hornswoggle all the time. Because he draws money.
Yeah, he's entertaining. But getting back to this realism, and you mentioned that, you really feel like there should be an element of that, and it really does, I think, put a talent over. Like you said, that people know you're married to Mickie, so that you wouldn't have somebody that you've got some kind of relationship with, because everybody knows that. And there's that element. People don't really know where do you separate the two. And you mentioned Thunder Rosa, who's also involved in MMA, and we've seen other professional wrestlers because they're gifted athletes and they're badass people who could get in the ring and shoot. How does that help professional wrestling today, or what do you feel that the crossover there, is it helping the business?
I think that we've always based everything off authenticity. I think our audience likes to respond to whatever is real, what's really there. So, as long as I feel like as long as we stick to that, that's always going to be our best foot forward, right? Like if we can always address like the real thing, then the audience is going to sort of respond to that, right? Because they're going to say, they don't have to pick any holes in it, because they don't have to go, oh, well, that's not true. They're doing this because of that. Like that's sort of a thing that exists in wrestling now is fans like to say, oh, well, they must be doing this because they're getting ready to do this. But if you eliminate that element as much as possible, then the audience then is forced to sort of take in what they're allowed then to just kind of feel what's happening right in front of their face. So with Cody and I, we didn't pretend anything. Everything that we did was the real situation, right? Like we would slowly turn up the heat on each other as far as our promos and interviews, and I would say, yeah, well, I know what you want. That makes me the dealer, because I have I have the title. Right. So, but I don't work for you, and All In is your show, but you want me because you want a shot at my title. So what are you willing to put up? You know, so, and then people were kind of like,
that makes sense.
That is what would happen, right? That's what happens in boxing. Like, there isn't like a commissioner in boxing who says, hey, guess what, Deontay Wilder, you're going to face Tyson Fury. No, like their camps get together and they go, hey, we can make some money here. Like, what do we need? Okay, well, I want this. Okay, well, I want this, you know. I want the fight to happen in Vegas. Okay, well, you know, we need this guy to be the referee, you know, and all this kind of thing. And when for that particular type of storytelling, we were like, well, you know, they were, oh, well, Cody's under contract to Ring of Honor, so there's no way that he could win, you know, because there's no way that the NWA would want a Ring of Honor guy to have their belt. But then they go, oh yeah, but it is Cody's show. Like, no way is he going to book himself to, you know, because that's the way fans are now. They think of every element, but then they're going like, oh, but I don't know, you know. Aldis is like, they've put all their eggs in one basket with him. Like, you know, he's the guy, you know, so like, I can't see him losing. Well, guess what? If we've created a situation where the fans are coming into it going, I can't see either one of these guys losing, the likelihood is they're going to buy a ticket or buy a pay-per-view to see what the outcome is. And so, you know, that's pretty much my input as far as any of my big title matches go. I go, what do we need to do to create a situation where the audience goes, I got to buy a ticket. I got to buy this pay-per-view because I have to. I don't know how this is going to turn out.
And that's exactly what that's your mission, is to leave them on the edge like that. And you know, you do this, and Cody does it as well. That it is on that edge of realism. That's where everybody knows. Okay, I know what it is. They're storytellers, but at the same time, man, there's something in there that, like you said, you're reaching back into real life there. And Cody does the same thing that he's been doing with AEW, and like a recent promo he did. I don't know if you caught that one, but man, you know,
it was fantastic.
And where it's on that, and people like, I think that was kind of a shoot, you know, getting personal with Chris and talking about his family, and you know, I'm not saying you learned from Cody, but you're from the same cloth, I guess, is kind of an old way to put it.
We had the same process when we were working together, you know, in the sense like, we would kind of go,
that's why it works.
Yeah, we knew what the line was, you know, as far as kind of like what crosses into distasteful and unnecessary versus like what gets people going, oh boy, like this is, you know, this is heating up, you know, and that's the way, to me, like that's the best way to do the kind of epic match, sort of Clash of Titans type of booking, where it's kind of like these two guys are both at the top of their game, and you know, something's got to give. Like that's, you know, me and Cody was I approached that very much like an old Western, right? Like gunslingers. I even said that in one of my promos. It's like, we're like a couple of gunslingers, right? Town ain't big enough for the both of us. But with another situation, like take Tim Storm, for example, totally different storytelling. Like, hey, I respect everything you are. Like you're one of the main reasons why we're here, but I have to beat you to be able to, you know, I'm sorry that my path to success involves having to end yours, you know, like, and then Tim's going, okay, well, I've got, you know, every time I'm in the ring, I've got to punch his chance, and I'm going to come at you with everything I've got, and I'm willing to put it all up on the line. So then people go, oh, damn, you know, like he's willing to risk it all, man. I don't see how I'm not sure how this is going to go, you know, and it's, I enjoyed that element to it. To me, that's a good worker. Like I get really tired of the sort of culture that exists that beguiles guys who are quote unquote lazy workers, right? Which, you know, which in their world means guys who don't do, you know, 25 huge high impact moves and kick out, and don't do a ton of dives, and don't do a ton of this and false finishes that, you know, And it's like, no, to me, that's lazy, actually. That if you're just going to go out there and just do an entire show's worth of action in one match, just to guarantee that the crowd goes 1, 2, oh,
right.
That's lazy, because you basically you're the guy who just walked up to the buffet and took all the roast potatoes out of the thing. You know what I mean? Like just take what you need. But you've just taken it away from everybody else, because everyone else on the card now, it's like this whole thing of like stealing the show. Like Shawn Michaels stole the show when he was the Intercontinental Champion by using his allotted time and the things that he was allowed to do in that position on the card, and doing it in such a way that made everybody go, wow, that guy is special. He didn't go out there and hit 5 finishers and, go into business for himself. Like, that's the difference. And that, like, unfortunately, that's one of those phrases that's been sort of taken and manipulated and misinterpreted by a lot of talent over the years. Is like, where, these guys, I'm going to go out there and steal the show. Like, no, what you mean is you're going to go out there and go into business for yourself and not respect your position on the card. We are very much about that culture. And what's interesting is we've never had to enforce it at the NWA. We've never had to take a guy and be like, hey, look, that's not your place to be doing that. Everybody gets it. Like we, I said it in
They
that.
see it as a whole. They see it as the whole picture, that what you guys are trying to do here.
Yeah, I said it in that first promo on NWA Powerrr. I said, like, there's a dressing room full of men and women, seasoned professionals. Like, they understand that today your job is to block. So that Nick Aldis and Tim Storm can score a touchdown. Next week it might be their job to block so you can score. You know what I mean? Like, it's
right. Yeah.
It's what's best for business, what's best for the audience. And but yeah, it's interesting because that's why we've been very judicious about who we bring in. And so that like take a guy like Trevor Murdoch, who you can absolutely trust implicitly to do what needs to be done, to perform that task on the show, and to give the audience what they need at that moment in time. And we're winning them over, Sean, one at a time. Like, I just, at the big event, the energy and the positivity towards like the NWA and towards the show and stuff was just unbelievable. I was blown away by the fans, by the sentiment of so many fans.
Yeah, and you can just tell by the numbers you're getting just on YouTube right now. And I know that Billy and Dave and you have a lot more planned ahead, because I told Dave that you guys are on the edge. You guys understand. Besides, maybe it's a throwback to professional wrestling. At the same time, you guys are looking way ahead beyond what a lot of these other organizations are doing with social media and these other platforms that are out there, and apps and all these other things. And I'll get into that. But you mentioned the talent, and I didn't want to blow by this without mentioning. I mean, each one of those guys that's on your roster is there for a reason. You mentioned Tim Storm, who reminds me of kind of this, Arn Anderson. I was trying to think who else. I had a little Mr. Perfect in him, but let's start with Tim. I mean, he's
Ronnie Garvin and Tim Storm.
Yeah. That's great. That's a great. But you know what I'm saying. And I mean, start with him. What is he brought to what you guys are doing now? And then we'll kind of go down the roster a little bit.
Well, Tim's persona. So I won't even say character, because he's not playing a character. Like, this is just persona.
So he is. Huh?
It really set the tone for what we wanted to be, and fortunately for me, it aligned with what I had wanted to do, because I was when I first started working with Dave and Billy, the stuff that I was sending them was a lot of HBO 24/7s, Showtime All Access, stuff like that, to sort of go, look how well they're telling a story and setting the hook for you to buy this pay-per-view. And like, because they realize that 2 boxers, take, Mayweather and McGregor was in the midst of their build when I first started talking to Dave and Billy. Or it may have already just happened. But we were right at the, that was the thing that was in the conversation, right? And then Canelo and Triple G followed afterwards. And like you take the contrast of those two, because like I'm like a casual fan of boxing, and that's been very educational for me to think, okay, well, what about the guys who feel about wrestling the way I feel about boxing? You know, like it's like I will buy certain pay-per-views when they set the hook, but I'm not going to watch all boxing all the time just for the sake of it. Yeah. And you know, Mayweather and McGregor kind of sells itself but they did a phenomenal job with. I mean, they were so much hype around the fight that then they were able to sell out arenas just for press conferences.
Right, I know.
Well, you need one press conference. They did like 4 because it was basically just people buying tickets to see them cut promos on one another. Yeah. You know, so like, you know, because sometimes I see that in the feedback for sort of other wrestlers, like, there's too much talking, and I go, no, there's too much bad talking.
Yeah, right.
There can never be enough like too much talking if it's good. Right. You know, like I can tell you, I've sat there and gone down a rabbit hole and watched Randy Savage promos for an hour. You know, watched Dusty Rhodes promos for an hour, Flair. You know, so it's like that's not the issue, right? But then Canelo and Triple G, that was sold to me completely differently because Canelo doesn't speak English, but I know how good he is, and then Triple G. Here's this guy who, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this, but like, here's this guy, G, who was kind of a journeyman pro boxer for a long time. Like he fought, he's from, I want to say Kazakhstan. I forget. I think it's Kazakhstan. Somewhere in Eastern Europe. So he could not get a break in the US, could not get a promoter, could not get fights in the US. They kept telling him, hey, you know, you're too boring, or, you know, you're like, you know, what's the deal? So he's killing it in Europe, but there's no money in Europe really, you know, and apart from maybe Germany and the UK. And like finally comes to the US, he's like 30, which for boxing is kind of like twilight years, right? Yeah. And suddenly, you know, because like, and you know, people once they actually see who this person is, personality, they just kind of start going like, and I went, I love this guy. He's like a big drama show, you know, and he's kind of talking about like, he's this, and he's just, and you know, by the end of the thing, I'm just like, I'm rooting so hard for Triple G because I'm just like, this guy's great. And like, he's still going, and he's just been plugging away and plugging away and plugging away. And now he's finally getting a shot. And you know, the thing that fight came, it was one of those ones where they were saying, look, you know, to boxing purists, to like the hardcore, they're going, this is the fight, the middleweight championship of the world, Canelo and Triple G, this is the show. Like, this is going to be one of the greatest. This is going to be Hagler Hearns, you know? Yeah. So I'm hearing that and I'm going, okay, all right, well, that's, you know, all right, that's, you got me halfway there. But then by the time I'd seen the packages on him and I'd seen that, you know, and I see him training and I hear his story and I see Canelo and his stories, I'm like, all right, take my money, you know? Yeah. And I'm basically explaining all this to Dave and Billy. And I'm going like, the fact that Triple G had, you know, it's taken him to the age of 30 to get a break and to get, does not turn me off. It does the opposite. Yeah. So it's like, let's take what's, you know, and I was already kind of harping on that point. And in the meantime, they had already met Tim because he was the existing NWA champion when Billy brought the organization. And Billy had sort of done the same thing where he's just like, God, this guy, like this personality, like what are unique? You know, he's a school teacher and he's, you know, and it was like, he's so authentic. That's a man. When you meet him and you talk to him, he's got this deep, gravelly Texas voice. And he's just got this presence. He's got these, you know, yes, he's got piercing blue eyes. Talks to you. You like, you know, within minutes of meeting him, I would have absolutely trusted him to look after my son. You know what I mean? You could just, you know, you just know that that's a man you can put your trust in, right? Honorable, yeah. And we get this, and we just see this whole thing. We just saw it all just unfolded in front of us. Because I looked at it and went, look, I know that the rap on me is that people kind of think, oh, he's a little bit full of himself, or you know, he's they don't, oh, he's British and he's articulate and he's good looking and he's this and he's that. Oh, he must be a dick, you know, like, because, or, you know, and I know what the rap on me is, you know, what's ultimately, that's the only thing that matters, is like what the audience is feeling about you. And I said, let's take, what's the real situation here? You've got this 53-year-old school teacher who's this sweetheart of a guy, but he's, you know, he's been a journeyman wrestler, but like he's finally kind of got this one thing that he's proud of, which is the NWA title. And now here's this guy, Nick Aldis, who seemingly has had tons of opportunities from a young age. He's, you know, he knows that he can speak. He's, you know, he's physically going to be, you know, younger, faster, bigger, but, and he's kind of unlikable in, so, you know, some elements, especially compared to this guy. And like, he's British, and it's like this whole thing itself, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, and then obviously, you know, by the time we got to the first episode of NWA Powerrr, we had 2 years of our own sort of history then. So to our sort of locked in core audience, it was, you know, there was a lot to work with. But, and I think that, you know, the people that bought tickets to Atlanta who were there was so invested in us and that thing, that I think by the time we'd shown the packages on Tim, and so any new audience that we got, and there were we got a lot of new audience to Powerrr, especially in that first episode. Yeah. By the end of that first episode, you know exactly who Tim Storm is, and you know what the whole point of this is, and you know who Nick Aldis is because I've been more publicized. But if you weren't familiar with Tim, you were by the end of it, and by the time he finished his interview, because that was a hell of a promo, the way he talks about Mama Storm and everything, like, and you know, I not trying to pat myself on the back or anything here, but that my only request, my only note when I saw the layout for show one was, I said, Tim needs an interview, because originally we were just going to do the match, and I said, no, Tim needs an interview. Like, that 2 minutes before he gets in the ring, like, that's got to be his, like, that's his moment to get everybody on his side, you know. And I was just like, let him speak from the heart.
Reason
and like,
care. Yeah.
And that was my only suggestion or request. And, you know, and to me, I just felt like, you know, I feel like by the time that bell rung, like, people might have respected me, but they wanted Tim to win. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, and that's what we wanted. We wanted that, you know, we wanted that situation where people were invested.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, you know, I couldn't help but thinking when I saw him, because I wasn't really familiar with Tim, and I was like, where's this guy been? Yeah. You know, I mean, really, and nice he's where he is now, but we're seeing a lot of that. I think a lot of people seeing this talent and going, wow.
It goes back to what I said before about a vehicle, because when most of the business has been predominantly focused on in-ring action and not on interviews and promos, or even if it is promos, it's promos that someone else has written for you, that where you're basically just kind of going out and sort of conducting or performing this sort of predetermined, you know, setup, you know, basically creating a premise for a match. Like, that's not the same thing as an interview where it's like a real, you know, where you're causing a real sort of emotional investment. You know, had he come along 20 years earlier or 30 years earlier, probably, who knows, you know, different kettle of fish. But at the same time, you know, he's also, he looks the best he's ever looked now. Like, if you go back and look at him,
I know. Jeez, when you said 53, I'm like, what? Wow. I didn't.
You know, it's just funny. It's just different circumstances, right? So it's like, hey, let's just take everything that's there. I don't believe that, and this is what I try to achieve as a performer, as a pro wrestler, especially as the world champion. That I want, by the end of the match, or at least within, you know, by halfway through, I don't want anybody in watching it thinking, this is stupid. You know, like, there's no way that this 54-year-old guy could beat this 32-year-old guy, right? Yeah. The same way that when I wrestled Marty Scurll, one of the top talents in the entire industry, you know, one of my best friends, we told a totally different story again, because we used what was real. Best friends, had different career paths. Now we're going to show down. But at the very beginning, there was like a smattering of kind of murmurs about Marty's size, you know, like, oh, you know, he's not a heavyweight, there shouldn't be a heavy, you know, but if by the time you've watched that match, Rocket Cup, nobody is going.
That was not part of the discussion.
That was dumb. There's no way he should have been in that match. Like,
you
know, and that's what I want to achieve mostly as a performer is like, I don't want anyone snickering or you know, guffing during any of my stuff. And you know, that Bret Hart is really one of my real sort of idols, and you know, I try to mimic a lot of Bret's philosophies, you know, on that side of things.
Well, you know, and with these, like you said, you can't. There's nowhere to run or hide. I mean, you have a very intimate crowd when you're cutting these promos, and people can interact with you right there. So it's got to be very genuine. You'll feel you feel it right away. You know when something isn't working or whatever. And you know, watching these, and each one of these guys, and it's not a huge roster, but every one of them is really unique and they're really good at what they're doing. You know, Eli Drake is another one who's you know, completely different personality, but he's grabbing people's attention.
Right.
So
I mean, just like, you know, untouchable on that mic. Like you know, he and I like we have very different styles of delivery, but you know, equally effective. You know, and so if you like my style of delivery, you know, then you've got, you know, they're great, but then you've got Eli coming out, who's just he's just rolling with catchphrases and hooks and, you know, and one-liners and stuff. That's a slightly different way of delivering than I do, you know, and different again to the way Tim cuts a promo, or Trevor Murdoch or Ricky Starks. But like, man, Eli, you know, you talk about another guy who's had some opportunities to showcase himself, but this particular vehicle has shown him to be, you know, has been able to, I believe, has been able to showcase who he has the potential to be, you know, and
also you got to be able to,
you know, that's why he chose to come on board with this, because he like I did had opportunities to go to AEW and go to other places, and he saw what we were doing and was like, that's the right vehicle for me.
And you've got to be able to think on your feet too. It isn't just you can go out there and have this great promo because you know your points you're going to hit and be very good at delivering it, but you've got to be able to react in a situation like this. And there's one thing that came to mind is they had the question mark out there, and I remember the line was, you know, they were chanting question mark, and well, I'll put an exclamation point, you know, and I just thought like that's good stuff,
right?
That separates you from a lot of people when you can do that and you listen. And you find your points, and you know, it's kind of like the Bobby Heenanism, you know, where they've just got, which comes out of nowhere, but that's a gift, man.
Talker to me, probably the best talker in the history of the business.
Yeah. But it's great to see with these guys, and we don't have time to talk about every single one. I just wanted to name them so people, if they haven't seen them yet, you've got to, you know, Aaron Stevens with his thespian bit he's got going, and that's that's fun. And Trevor Murdoch too. That's another one I wanted to mention because in a world where everybody's got to be cut buff, you know, and man, that guy is, as you say, a great hand. I mean, I've just enjoyed watching his matches. The guy can do a lot.
He's classic.
Yeah.
It's like watching a guy. It's like. I said, like I alluded to earlier, you know, I love entertainment, all forms of it. Mm-hmm. What I really like to do, like I've been to musicals, I've been to plays, I've been to, you know, all sorts of different Cirque du Soleil. What I like to do is I like to watch highly trained professionals who have mastered their craft or their discipline do it. And that's Trevor Murdoch, man. Like he is so classically trained in the sort of art of like classic, believable pro wrestling. You know, and he's a huge guy. You know, he's a true heavyweight, big, believable, rough and tumble redneck, and like he, you know, this is again the right vehicle. Like he, you know, he had a little run in WWE and was part of a good tag team, but you know, after that they didn't have anything for him. I can only assume because, you know, because you need the thing with WWE is sometimes you can almost be too good, because if you can if you can talk for yourself, and you know, for example, that's not really a required skill now when you think about it. Like, why would you even bother having a guy cut a promo when if you're looking at him? But because he's not going to do that on the show, you know. So but Trevor, he can deliver with anyone, and you've seen the reaction to him because he's authentic. You know, there's an authenticity to him, and also like there's a credibility to him, because if he couldn't move like that, and he wasn't 6'4" and, you know, close to 300 pounds, then people might think, okay, great. But now what you do is now his look almost works to his advantage. You know,
no, it does. Absolutely. That's what I was going to say.
Right.
I mean, you don't expect him to,
Right.
and it's not just like what he can do in the ring, but I mean, the matches that I've seen that I've really enjoyed him. And honestly, going into him, I didn't think I would. I was thinking, oh boy, what's this, you know?
He's
and
now
I'm yeah, absolutely.
Like, he is absolutely a master of his craft, trained by Harley Race, you know, and to boot, a 100% gentleman, true, great professional, like good human being.
Well, I would love to talk about the whole roster, but I've kept you a while, and there's a couple other big questions I wanted to get to, though. But and I mentioned this at the top of the conversation that you guys got a lot planned ahead. I don't know how much you can tell us, but can you give us a little insight of what people might expect to see in the coming months with the NWA? I know that Billy and Dave got big plans along with you.
I think you're going to see, you know, the energy and the delivery from the talent, all the men and women, you know, who performed at the GPB studios the first time around was unbelievable, and that was without the response to the show that we've had. Now, following the unbelievably positive response we've had to the show, I feel like this one's going to be the standard is just going to keep on, right? And you know, and you've been there, like when you've been around. I mean, God, you were around a roster that had Flair, Mr. Perfect, Rick Rude, you know, just these absolute masters of their craft, who were all, and then, you know, with Shawn Michaels and other guys coming up behind them, and, you know, coming up behind them, and they're going, all right, I see you. I'm gonna follow that. You know, they go out and they do that. You know. And we're getting there now, you know, with promos. It's like, there was no accident that first episode, you know, that I had the first promo. I deserve to have that first spot, you know, the sort of, you know, I'm obviously the torchbearer for the company, but it was also, Dave said, you need to go out there and light a fire under everybody else.
Yeah.
Because if you go out there and nail this promo, you know that Eli Drake coming up 10 minutes from now in his interview, he's not going to want to seem like second fiddle to me.
Right.
So now he's got to go out. He's got to deliver a hell of a promo. And then Tim Storm at the end of the night, now pressure's like, hey, you got to make sure that you get all these people behind you with this promo. You know, so then, you know, then you take a kid like Ricky Starks, like, God, you know, brand new talent. He's got everything going for him. The sky is the limit for him. Okay. Here's your promo, kid. Better go out there and nail it. You know, like, you better get you get these people behind you, because you're not going to get a pop when you first walk out, because they don't know who you are. But you better make sure by the end of that promo that they are. And he took every bit of that and absolutely drove it home. You know, like, and so Thunder Rosa, you know, like, you know, knows that she's been waiting and waiting and waiting for her chance to shine as Thunder Rosa, not as some other character, not as subservient to somebody else, as Thunder Rosa. She sits around and she's seeing all these other people go out and nail it, and I saw her in the back just itching, just like, let me out there, you know what I mean? Like, let me get out there. And
let me loose.
Again, she was out, and I mean, she had you know, we built her up, you know, so it was kind of like she had to deliver, and she did, you know, and I just think that that combination of pressure and anticipation and good energy is just going to keep multiplying. And I think that's, you're going to see the right things unfold. You're going to see the right guys get put into the spots that they've earned. And you're going to see, you know, just continue to see top quality professional execution and outcomes that are, you know, based on what the audience wants to see, you know, to satisfy our fan base.
Oh, well, healthy competition. It makes for a really great atmosphere for everybody. And I mentioned, you know, Billy and Dave are very much into these other platforms, looking into it. And right now, YouTube is the main platform. But of course, you guys are looking beyond that, because that's not going to sustain this big machine as it grows. Might we see, of course, you got the pay-per-views going, but maybe is the end game, you know, a TV deal, or finding other ways to do it, like we're seeing almost in a sense with
I think
you know, like Netflix and that kind of thing?
I think, well, the end game is to be to be sustainable and to be profitable. But we're much closer to being profitable than people think, because we probably could have taken a TV deal somewhere by now, but it would have been a bad deal, and then we would have been, you know, forced into a certain number of costs, right. You know, forced into a number of parameters that we have to stay within, you know, and ultimately we need proof of concept. And if, you know, my responsibility that people say about YouTube is that, like, well, if you're not getting paid to be on TV, then why would you be on TV? Because it's just going to limit your audience. Because YouTube, I believe in the on-demand culture. Like we're averaging a couple of 100,000. Yeah. Okay. Like less than 10% of those are watching it live as it happens.
Right.
So what would happen to our number?
Keeps on giving.
Right. What would happen to our number if we went on TV? You know, okay, great. We can brag that we're on TV and it makes us feel like we're more legitimate, but ultimately it's not going to do anything. It's just going to, you know, so our end game is to create a model where our content drives our other revenue streams. You know, in other words, like it always used to be, which always worked. Where, you know, our content creates stars and creates moments that people then want to pay to see, whether it be pay-per-view, live event, and then it drives our other revenue streams with merchandise, licensing, advertising, because we have paid advertising on the show now. You know, people laughed at the goofy ads, but the point of that is always to show, like, hey, we could advertise legitimately using this style of thing. So now people actually want to see the commercials rather than just skip them. Right. Why bother shoving a 30-second regular commercial in there, knowing that someone can just double tap their screen a couple of times to skip through it?
Well, I keep watching the video game one over and over. When you come up, I watch. I don't go.
That's an actual commercial. Like that's a paid partnership. Like that's, you know, I have a personal, you know, paid partnership with Retromania, and then we use that to then parlay that into a separate licensing deal with the NWA and Retrosoft. So that's a proof of concept. You know, like, and we have sold some other ad spots to some other. So you're going to see those in the coming weeks. Legitimate advertising done in our style. So it's adverts that people actually watch, believe it or not.
So, you know, besides Nick, the fact that this is, you know, like a great stage for you. This is the way you want you to be presented. But I know you've had other interest from these other organizations. Would love to have Nick Aldis a part of their roster. Why not? Why haven't you taken that? You probably could get a big deal somewhere. I'm sure Cody is. I don't know this. I'm just thinking that knowing where you are and what they think of you. So why this? Do you feel that you're part of something new that's really, you know, setting a new standard in the business, or what is it?
Partly that. But also I'm involved with this organization, you know, at a deeper level than just as a talent, which is something that I've been very honest about from the beginning that I've wanted to do. You know, like I used to get told in TNA all the time, hey, we don't, you just be a wrestler. We don't pay you to think, I was okay, because I've got something going on in there. I'm not always right, but there's stuff coming out, and this is the only place where I can actually help shape the entire company. And I enjoy that. And I believe that in the long run, it will pay off in a bigger fashion for me, both financially and otherwise.
Yeah. And you mentioned The Rock as we kind of wrap up here, that just something else I think you'd be very capable of being very successful at is the acting part of it. I think Rock has shown that, some of the best actors in the world can come from that world, because I can't even imagine when he came out and maybe had a reading for something, and what you guys have to do, remember, have in your head 5 minutes of a monologue or whatever. They probably just were blown away by the fact you probably said, yeah, I'm reading. And I think that, I could see you being a lead in The Kingsman or something like that. Is that something you're interested in pursuing at some point?
Sure. Right now I'm at the top of my game, as a wrestler, and I understand that a lot of those elements bleed into acting, bleed into television. I've always had aspirations to be in that world, but at the same time also aware that I'm not classically trained in that world. So, if I were to do it, I would be very respectful about how I would to do it. I wouldn't just expect to just waltz in and, get roles. I would go and learn and train. And again, if the right opportunity presented itself, sure. It's all about, to me, I've been frustrated through before in my career, as far as WWE not giving me a shot, and, and other places kind of, hamstringing me a little bit. Yeah. So my belief and my philosophy is always to over deliver for whoever's going to put their faith in you, whoever's going to put their money up for you, and and like in Billy's case, put their own personal money up, and put their faith in you. Like, I'm going to over deliver for them, and as a professional and as a human being. So if those other elements, I've done a bit of stage, and I've done a few little. I just did a little TV spot here, actually filmed in Richmond a couple of weeks ago for a series on one of the Discovery networks. But so I flirted with it a little bit, and I understand that there's some people think I lend myself well to that. Never say never, but right now, like I am so locked in and in the zone with who I am as Nick Aldis, the national treasure, the world's champion, the pro wrestler. It's like that's I feel myself getting better at this every day, and it's like that's really empowering.
Well, I think you don't realize it, but you are in training for that. I think you'll slide right into it when they come calling, and I really do believe they will. Billy Corgan is kind of this mystery figure to a lot of people. They see he comes on, he does promo things, and I don't know how much he'd allow you to reveal or how much you want to, but can you give us a little insight into his passion for this business and why he's purchased this company and has such a vision for it?
Sure. He really does. He has a huge amount of passion for the business. I don't know if that's really even in question at this point. I feel like that's fairly well documented to anyone who's paid attention. But he's also experienced, that people, that I think there's somewhat of an assumption, certainly when as the show is gaining traction, as it starts to get seen by different, by actual entertainment publications like Variety and stuff like that. There's this thing of like Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corgan, dips his toe in wrestling kind of thing. And it's like, well, he's been dipping his toe in wrestling for a number of years. He had his own promotion in Chicago. He was an owner at Impact. It's not his first foray. What all that's happened is actually what he's actually been able to learn from those experiences. So he's now got a combination of his own personal experience as a very successful recording artist and touring artist, and he handles all of that. The Smashing Pumpkins is his business. Like he writes the songs, it's all his IP. The buck stops with him.
Yeah.
So he's got that experience on that large scale, big money entertainment business, right? Add to that the fact that he's also got these scars now from his other forays in wrestling, and he's learned from his mistakes or all his experiences, be them unpleasant or not.
Mm-hmm.
And they're combining now, plus the team that he's assembled around him, like Dave Lagana, who
Mm-hmm.
Works incredibly hard, and then myself and Maureen, who's our director of operations, and there are a number of other folks, who are very, very key. We're a small team, but are very key to sort of shaping this whole team, this whole culture, this whole brand. He's so all in with this. That it's like, and the good thing is that I think, unlike any other time he's been involved, he has a team of people who he can trust. So if he has to step away for a few days to focus on his family or focus on the music industry, he knows that he can have his directives, he can have his final say, and it will be delivered. It will get done. He's a student of the game. He's a historian. And the best thing about working for Billy, unequivocally, is that he is able to put his hands up and go, all right, that was my idea. That one didn't work. Tell me how we can make it better next time, or let's go back to the drawing board. Or what, he's the first boss I've ever had who when he actually says it, he means it. He says, "What do you think?"
Yeah.
He actually
really wants to hear it.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, fantastic, man. And folks, really, you got to tune in, check it out every week. Premieres on YouTube. And really, you guys, the foundation you got there, the people you have, and it's a relatively small roster compared to some of our other organizations out there. But it's I see this thing just growing and growing. But I think that you've really started something that people are really catching on to.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've never felt this level of momentum and buzz for anything I've been involved with, and that's saying something, considering that I've been in the ring with Sting and Kurt Angle and other some legends of our business, Hall of Famers. But this is definitely, as far as I'm concerned, for me as a talent, this is the most buzz and momentum I've ever felt.
I hope to have you on every now and then just to see where we are. But I want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much.